很感谢大家今天来参加我们的 AFI 的这一个升学讲座哈。AFI 影响力联合会以及咖啡俱乐部，这个我就不用多介绍了，大家已经都是我们的这个老朋友了。然后思慧学院是这个 AFI 的这个教育领域的非盈利的合作伙伴。我们呢是致力于将最优质的这个财商、投资、沟通、领导力及职场的课程呢，带给我们北美的华人家庭，包括我们的这一个华二代哈。今天呢，我们也是刚刚收到了一个非常好的消息，我们的这一个参加Diamond Challenge 商赛的这一个8个队伍呢，其实我们带了10个队伍，有8个队伍呢之前是进入到了首轮的这一个半决赛。现在的话呢，我们是拿到了这个消息哈，有2个队伍呢又是进入了下一轮的这一个相当于是决赛吧。所以的话呢，我们今年也是取得了非常好的一个成绩。思慧学院呢，主要是以财商和投资的教育为主哈。在这一个夏天的话呢，我们也会推出首期的这个线下的青少年的创业以及这个财商的夏令营。更多的详情呢，一会儿我会出现一个2维码，大家可以扫码联系我们的小助手进行咨询。AFI 的影响力，目前的话呢 ，AFI 呢是已经形成了一个约有5万人，来自全球有5万人的一个在线社群哈，包括有140多个不同主题的微信群。在今年的话呢，我们还新增了一个云健身的公益课程，每周的话呢，有数十位的这一个健身教练哈，他们是贡献自己的这一个公益的时间，来免费的带领我们的群友进行这个健身。此外的话呢，今年的话呢，我们也是推出了一个叫做 TCPC 的亲子学院。亲子学院的话呢，目前我们是有非常多各种各样的一个关于 parenting 以及这一个青少年的心理的成长的一些活动，包括我们的这一个自闭症以及 ADHD 的互助的这一个微信群，以及我们的这个幼儿故事的这一个活动。还有我们的这个单亲爸爸妈妈的养娃的经历分享哈。包括最近的话呢，我们也是发起了一个关于这个抑郁症心理健康的这样的一个微信互助群。如果我们的这一个家长想要进入我们的这个亲子学院的微信群呢，一会儿的话呢，我会放出2维码，大家加我们的小助手，然后可以进到我们的这一个更多的微信群里面。在这里的话呢，我要介绍一下 AFI-Compass。AFI-Compass 的话呢，它是AFI 和思慧学院的升学的这样的一个合作伙伴。AFI-Compass 呢，它其实也是一个升学的资源对接的平台，前身呢是为海域国际教育集团。AFI-Compass 呢是致力于为我们的家长哈过滤这个口碑最好的前藤校的招生官以及独立的升学顾问资源，并且呢也是对接这个优秀的像 AP、ACT 等课程的这样的一个辅导资源以及这个竞赛的资源。此外的话呢 AFI-Compass 会为我们这个思慧以及AFI 的家长呢提供一个全方位的升学服务的支持，以及这个质量的把关哈。确保的话呢是您是得到这一个最优质的来自于我们这个独立顾问以及前招生官的升学服务。此外的话呢，所有签约AFI-Compass 这个平台上的升学顾问的这个孩子哈，AFI 以及思慧的话呢，包括我们现在成立的一个非盈利组织的平台叫做 AFI， 都会为孩子呢提供这个免费的志愿者的服务，以及领导力以及其他的软实力提升的一些项目。好了，今天的话呢，我们就正式进入到今天的这个升学讲座的主题。今天的话呢，我们的嘉宾呢是 Frank Lin 呢，他同时呢也是我们思慧学院的这一个投资课程的导师哈。同时的话呢，他是在罗德岛的一个非常优质的私立学校作为客座的这个投资教授，在学院里面进行授课。此外呢 ，Frank Lin 他毕业于沃顿商学院，此前的话呢是在许多著名的投行都有担任过这个高管的这个职位。他同时呢也是在自己辅导一些我们说的一些非常就是说优秀的学生哈，特别是在这个商科及经济方面。此外的话呢，他的一大特色呢就是说特别能和我们的华二代进行交流，能帮助我们的这个家长哈进行这一个 帮助我们的家长搭建一个 communication 的纽带哈，同时呢，能挖掘孩子的这一个内驱力，以及 inspire 他们，让他们知道如何自推的来进行这样的一个升学的这样的努力。好的，我现在就把时间呢交给我们的 Frank 林，Frank。Okay, now I give the stage and time to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Allison. Hang on 1 second here. All right, I hope everybody can see me. Let me go ahead and share my screen to get this all started. Share the sound and go from here. Okay. Yeah, so thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your weekend to kind of talk and hear what I have to say. The team has been fantastic to me. One of the things that I've always found that's great about this organization is that we foundationally do it from our principles and what we believe, hopefully for the future, is best societally as well as for each one of ourselves as well. So basically what I was asked to do was come in and talk to you guys a little bit about perhaps my viewpoint on how I engage with the next generation, how we sort of create the bridges that may sometimes need to be created from generation to generation, those gaps, and trying to understand each other, especially once they get to sort of the teenage years, as they start to think for themselves, which is perfectly natural. So that's pretty much what I'm here for, but in the lens as well of what I kind of do with the teams. So a little bit of background, I've known Angie, who's the founder of BizWise, and been driving all these activities for well over a decade. So we've been good friends ever since we met, and I've kept close contact with her, and it just so at the time seemed like we were aligned in what we wanted to do. We were just doing things kind of independently. And so over time, I've joined her group and participated in a lot more of the activities and the teaching and the boot camps. And then she found that I was actually mentoring students for college, albeit just occasionally, sort of informally. And so we talked a little bit more about that, and she felt some of the things that, from my experience, what we did, we would have something to share, hopefully be helpful to you all as well. So that's sort of the context of where we come from here, okay? I take a look at the front page here that they gave me. They're too kind, right? They gave me a picture where I was young and where I was wearing a suit and tie. So I obviously look a lot better at that point in time than I probably do now. But hopefully a little bit more gray hair in my head and a little bit more experience also will offset that. So without any further ado, we can just kind of go ahead. All right, so let's see. All right, so again, that was the welcome, okay? So who am I? Well, I think Allison had made some mention of my background in terms of my schooling and whatnot, and that's great and all, honestly, but it's not that big of a deal, right? I mean, it's good education, it's good pedigree. I do have experience in that area in terms of being from Wharton. Before that, I was an engineer, came out of the Midwest Big Ten schools, the engineering schools out of there, so Michigan and Wisconsin. Did some teaching there as well. But today, my full-time job is investments, hedge funds, private equity. So that's what I do for a living. As I moved through that and my firm and my position sort of matured, it kind of ran itself. So I was looking for something else to do. And I also teach part-time at a local university. I'm on the East Coast in the Northeast in Rhode Island. So in Providence, I think those of you who are good geographically and know who those Ivies are, there is one Ivy there, but I don't teach at that one. I was asked to, but I sort of turned that down because I felt that they already had enough help, to be honest with you. And if, let's say, there wasn't a need somewhere else, then maybe I would have considered it. Maybe I'll consider it in the future, but for now, no. So I teach at a small Catholic university up in Providence, and that's been very, very fulfilling for me. I also, like I said before, I'm part of the BizWise team. So that executive position is, I think, nameplate in title only. Really what it is for me is that I enjoy interfacing with the next generation of students, just like I do at university. I think their ideas are fantastic. Many times they have a better demographic understanding of the future than even we do with all of our training and all of our experience. So it's just really an amazing thing to see the next generation think. So that being said, I am also a parent. I'm a parent to a 9-year-old daughter, and she's pretty feisty, just like her mother. So they're definitely the people that rule the house. And again, I really enjoy seeing what she says, because sometimes the spontaneity of what she says is so interesting, right? And that's really where I sort of derive my fulfillment from when I do this kind of thing. Okay? So that being said, I also do a little bit of college admissions advice. This actually came very impromptu, informally, through friends of mine that I'm a Wharton 03 graduate. So let's just say my friends were getting of the same age where their children were starting to consider colleges and going there. And oddly enough, these people are Wharton MBAs, but they couldn't reach their children either. They wouldn't listen to them either, which I found really, really interesting. But for whatever reason, they would be more receptive to talking to a third party like myself. So that's how it sort of formatively started. And over time, it became one of those things where I had to limit it because of the demand. But, you know, I always try to give folks, you know, my all when that comes to pass. So that's pretty much what this is. So you might ask again what my motivation behind it is. I gave you a little bit of that already, but the reality is that, you know, you get to a certain point, I think, at least for me, and you know, things are going okay. And you can see that there isn't anything particularly that you have to prove anymore. You can kind of see that your achievement is sort of got to a point where you're pretty okay with what you're doing. And, you know, what next, right? So obviously when I had my little Sydney, I started thinking about the next generation and what to do. And then it wasn't just her, but it was also, well, what about the folks around her? What about the future generations as well, right? And so, like I said, I had a pretty good time talking to students and young people, had some good experience with that. I think part of it is that you could say that part of me never grew up, okay? I think most of you guys who are married with great husbands probably know this, is that all good husbands probably have a little bit of a kid in them, right? And so that's pretty much myself in a nutshell as well. So I don't really have any sort of elitism or a separation of generations when I talk to them. I just talk to them as another person. And so this is the reason why I found it so interesting. So I felt a need to give it back. And a lot of my friends around me knew that. The other thing that I found was that while I was at Wharton, they give you the opportunity to actually read admissions essays and see how the admissions process works, at least in second year. And when I saw some of that stuff, yes, it's good. And I think it's very rigorous. I think for the most part, it's reasonably fair, but I also saw a lot of inequity and a lot of the suspicions that I thought were part of the admissions process because it's so uber competitive were actually realized. So that being said, I wanted to sort of level the playing field, especially for, you know, folks like in my cultural area. So the Asian American, Asian communities as well. Because I felt that we have so much to give, so much to offer the universities, and sometimes they don't see that. So that's really what that is. And then the final thing that I would just tell you is that, look, I just happen to be reasonably curious about learning new things. I think we all kind of know this, like people that kind of run the world also are sort of have that in their DNA. So, you know, they tend to be self-learning, self-taught, you know, self-motivated, self-driven, right? And I was that to some degree, but as I grew in my career, I became more and more of that. So I've always been intellectually curious, and especially hearing it from the next generation, I found it to be fascinating. So that's the reason why. So, you know, in the context of what we're going to talk about, I know that, like I said, a lot of you probably have sons and daughters that are considering college and whatnot. And so I figured it would be a good idea to frame it in this way, and then sort of talk about maybe what the gaps are and then how to bridge them. So the first thing that I thought about is that, you know, everybody's got college on the mind. And the first question I thought would be, well, fundamentally, why should we even go? Okay. And, I'll give you a few seconds to think about it, but, I've got the top universities down there by logo, and that's great. But I mean, why do spend 4 years of your life at a place? Is it just for the books and just for the education? So let's take a look. So these are some of the things I came up with, okay, that are just very, very, commonplace. Okay. So if you take a look at this, right, a lot of this stuff is sort of motivated by momentum around you and environment, right? So why go? Well, because it seems to be the right thing to do, right? A lot of folks say so. Brand seems to be great. Everybody talks about Harvard like they're great. They talk about Stanford like they're great, right? They talk about the class, the curricula, the structure, all these good things. At the end, you're hoping that it nets you a good job, right? But at the same time, this stuff is getting more and more expensive, and it's going way higher than the rate of inflation, except maybe not now, right? But in the past, it's gone way higher than the rate of inflation, probably 7-8% a year, when inflation was maybe in the low 2s or 3%. Now that it's about the same, maybe, but I don't know if it's sustainable. Okay. The other things that you think about are it takes 4 years of life, and at the same time, if you think about it, I don't know that you can teach greatness or applied knowledge from a class or from a book, right? I mean, that's something that books can't really transmit, right? A lot of that life experience comes from people and your environment and surroundings, right? So that's the question that we still ask. So what are we really trying to do here, and what are we really missing when we go to these top schools? Well, I think for me, the reality is that you can probably tell is that I'm focused on the network. I'm focused on the people that I talk to. Just like when I talk to the younger folks out there, I listen and I observe very carefully, and I treat them as a peer. Okay? The same thing goes with this, is that I believe that the top schools, when you're looking at these things, are always about the network. It has nothing to do with the class. I'll be honest with you, when I was at Wharton, I was known as one of those people that you couldn't find in class. Now, before that, don't tell all your sons and daughters that. I hope they're not listening. Before that, I was totally a nerd. I was always in class. I always did all the homework assignments ahead of time and all that stuff. When I got to Wharton, I was completely the opposite. You found me on the golf course more often than you found me in class. But oddly enough, guess who I found on the golf course? The same, multi-conglomerate families, kids that were going to Wharton as well. And we kind of looked at each other kind of sheepishly at first because we were both embarrassed that we were skipping class. But we ended up being very good friends to the point where, last December, I was in Taiwan, just snuck in there before all the protocols hit again. And I got to meet everybody, and we were talking about what sort of investments and what sort of deals we can do. So it just tells you how these random occurrences, or the events that seem random, are very important in the whole scheme of things when you're talking about what sort of real education you're getting out of a top level institution. So when we take a look at this stuff, okay, one of the things that I know that we as an Asian community tend to focus on is we tend to focus on the fundamentals. And there's nothing wrong with that, except you don't want to focus on it too long because you might miss out on the foundational network that you need to build and those social skills. So I was that person when I came out of school, undergrad, as an engineer. I wasn't that social. I could talk to people, but I wasn't nearly the person that I was when I went to MBA, because I realized that it didn't matter how many skills I had or how smart I was, right? I still needed people around me to help me out. So to me, again, the elite colleges are never about the curriculum. They're about bouncing ideas off each other, people that are peers of yours that are equivalently as intelligent and as strong-willed and strong-minded as you, and may not necessarily agree, but they battle test those ideas that you may have. So if you're willing to go out there for the right reasons, it can be a revelation in terms of what you learn, because it's actually not from the books. It's totally from the people around you who are probably your future clients, your future customers, and your future friends, of course. All right, so let's talk about the parts about being a parent. And for this, okay, I'm just really another parent, to be honest with you. So I'm no expert in this field. I am not a person that claims to be one. Okay? What I will do is I'll share my experience. And this is the same thing I do when I'm talking to the younger generation as well, your sons and daughters. So the question was posed, I believe, in the write-up or the one pager that was put out there, that, you know, what's the difference between East and West? Well, I'll tell you this. I try to frame it in terms of what I thought of my parents when I was growing up. So my parents put me through the usual academic ringer, okay? I skipped a couple of grades. Graduated high school when I was 16, did my engineering degree in 3 years, was 19, master's degree 21, okay? Does that make me any smarter than anybody else? No, obviously not. But I'm just saying that I was pushed. I was, you know, rigidly pushed to do better all the time academically. So when I was going through this process, especially when I turned teenager, okay, this is what I thought. They would compare me all the time, number one. So they would be like, they'd compare me to anyone. It could be a person 4 years my senior, they would compare me to. They're like, look, you know, my friend's son or daughter is at this place at Bell Labs. Look how great they're doing, okay? And I didn't even have a chance to respond. I couldn't even defend, right? So I found that to be rather irritating. The other thing that I would ask them is like, okay, so you want me to go to a school? Where should I go? And they would tell me, you know, go to Harvard or MIT or Caltech. And I would ask them why. And they said, because it's Harvard or MIT or Caltech. Not really about fit, well, whether it actually made sense to me, not whether about we should go over there, take a look, not whether we should talk to the professors, maybe some of those people that are actually going to teach you something. But no, let's just go because there's the name and there's the brand, right? And there's a reputation, okay? And then they always told me, you got to study hard, you got to work hard. And there's nothing wrong with that. But too much of that is a bad thing, as many of us know, right? Oftentimes, we'll always say that technically, we're probably better than everybody in whatever group we're working at, right? But the reality is that we don't get the same notoriety or attention to be able to do that. So that really is an issue, in my opinion. It's a lack of glorious representation. So really, when it comes to this kind of thing, the question is, are you working harder all the time without working smarter? Because the person that actually ran the corporation, right, is the person that came up with the idea. Don't you think it's a better idea to maybe start thinking like that, right? Rather than waiting your turn, which could be to the end of your retirement before you actually get the opportunity to do something. So that conversation was never even brought up, okay? I personally feel this one all the time, which is that they always told me to study harder, okay? And then when that didn't work, they told me to study harder. So that's one of those things that I found to be kind of amusing in hindsight, but during that time, it really kind of stunk, okay? And again, I said before, work smarter and not harder when you think about this more efficiently. And the reason why I say this is in context, right? A lot of times I didn't have time for my friends. Didn't have time to bounce ideas off anybody. It was sort of me in my silo doing my studying, right? And so what happens is that if you study too much and you're looking at conventional stuff, then you miss the unconventional. You miss the potential ideas out there that could be mind-blowing. So an example would be when I got admitted to a couple other Ivies. One of them was, and then also Cal Berkeley as well, out in California. Oh, my little one just stopped by, sorry. But yeah, so that being said, right, I wanted to go to Berkeley. And my parents said, no, it's not a good idea. Shouldn't go out there, close to us. Okay? But the reality is that had I gone out there to Berkeley, that's when Jerry Yang and Yahoo were taking off. My track would have been completely different. I don't know for better or for worse. But what I'm saying is I was an engineer at the time, and you just never know what could have happened. So I think many times when you look at this kind of thing, right, you have to have an understanding of why you're going. Okay? And it goes beyond the brand. Okay. And they would keep telling me the same thing. So just because you keep saying it doesn't mean I'm listening more. I think if you ask, a lot of teenagers, they probably say the same thing. That my parents kept telling me the same thing, but I just sort of started tuning it out. So, and then the final thing, this one's kind of tough, right? But that was me rebelling, but I tried to be very honest about this, about how I was thinking at the time, which is that, if you're asking me to do something, shouldn't you do it by example yourself first? And, sometimes parents want just something better for their children. I know that in hindsight, but at the time I just felt like, how can you tell me that and not have done it yourself? Okay. So that's really what I was thinking in terms of sort of the generation gap, the cultural gap there, right? And this, I tried to think about it not from my side, the teenager side, but I tried to think about from parents' side, okay? So this is not probably as accurate because I'm sort of extrapolating what my mom and pa really would think, okay? But I hope it's reasonably accurate. Okay? So the questions that, we would pose if I was immigrating to the United States is that, why would we move to the United States? So I think everybody would say there seems to be a better opportunity, right? And then on top of that, better opportunity, especially for our children, right? So that being said, right, those are the two main things. They're pretty generic, but the idea is that really, when we come down to it, we're looking for better opportunities for ourselves, more freedom and whatnot. Not exactly sure what it's going to give us, but that's what it is, okay? So if you think about this also, though, why is the United States better, right? And I put it down here as well, that if you think about it, sometimes we think of the United States as being more creative, more diverse. The resultant of that is that if you think about it, most of the major tech companies and most of the major ideas, innovations come out of the US. So if we were thinking about it from an educational perspective, as just rigorously from our focus on academics, right? What would make the United States so much better? Well, obviously our education must be better, right? Especially technically. But is that really true? From K to 12 especially? I mean, you compare the Eastern systems from China and Taiwan, where my parents are from, and I'm telling you, there's no comparison in terms of the rigor of the mathematics, the rigor of the science. The STEM is so much stronger from a foundational perspective in Asia than it is here in the United States. You really got to look in the United States to find pockets where they have that sort of rigor, right? Such are the exams that are so difficult, right? The entrance exams to college, that everybody is so afraid of them in the cram schools, right? So I don't know that that is true, right? Then that means that in the United States, right, if it's not the education, we just must have somehow more technically qualified people somehow. I find that to be very hard to believe too, because we have a population that's only 1/5 the size of China's, right? And not everybody is so well heeled and trained to be a technical person. So I find that to be very hard to believe, right? But I think the third bullet, if we start thinking about that, if it's not those two that we're used to, that we're comfortable for education, maybe it is this idea where you have to struggle to find your way, that you have to find that way, but there's an opportunity to actually get through that they give you the freedom to try to do that. And then there are people around you that are of different opinion and different culture that gives you that idea to bounce that idea off them and see if it actually works. And if you notice, right, I think up here, it says here, a business idea here usually works almost everywhere with some localization, right? But if you think about it, right, I mean, Alibaba and a lot of the big companies in China basically took snippets of eBay, Amazon, Google, what have you, Microsoft, and put them together and localized it for their own markets. So I don't think that's incorrect at all. So when we think about this and we reason it out, we will say to ourselves, like, should we then tell our children the same things where you should work hard, study hard, you should do all these things the way we did them to a degree, right? But this is what we work to escape. So I put, someone that I'm sure everybody recognized, right? And what did he say? He said, you don't want to try to do the same thing and expect a different result. So in this case, okay, maybe what we should be thinking about is how to meld the best of East and West. So the rigor, the fundamentals, the foundation of the East, and then the creativity, the inspiration, the innovation of the West. So how do we really do that, right? And at the bottom, I put this for sure. It's like, look, I would never criticize my parents. My dad's already gone. He passed away a couple of years ago. And I know how much they love me. That's for sure. They only want the best for me. So in many of the conversations that I have with candidates about this, one of the things that I always reinforce is that, you may hate sometimes what your mom or dad says, but they're just trying, just like you are. They're trying to find their way. So we have to put on a good filter and try to understand where they're coming from. Okay. They only want the best for you. That's really what it is. So we'll try to find a way to make it work out optimally for both. All right, so other questions that materialized in this conversation with the team is that they would ask, why does my child seem to hate the consultants that I hired to try to help him or her through this process, the college admissions process? And I'll be honest with you, that's a loaded question. I don't know their sons or daughters, and I don't know the consultants either. So it would be pompous of me to make a judgment based on that, because I don't know the relationships intimately, right? But what I can tell you is that when I work with people, I'm going to do it, I always make sure there's a very good personality, character, sort of goal set fit, that everybody kind of is on the same plane and everybody knows what to expect. There's nothing that's particularly surprising. And with that respect comes the courtesy to listen and to observe, not me necessarily tell them what to do, but to try to guide knowing what they want to do. So that's really the difference in terms of a lot of these engagements I've seen where I've had candidates that came from or were dealing with full consultant teams on the other side. And they would come talk to me and they'd be like, wow, I mean, your approach is so different. And I was like, I don't even know what the standard approach is. What I do know is I know how I would want to be approached. What I do know is that how I would want to be respected, how my opinion would be respected. So that's just simply the way I treat you. And that seems to be, quite conducive to the young people that I've talked to, almost universally. Doesn't matter who they are culturally. This seems to be very, very universal. So the second bullet here I talk about is like, look, as much as you may think they need it, they didn't ask for it. If they didn't ask for it, and your son or daughter most likely is very high achieving because you're trying to get them into elite places, which means they're not average. They're already outstanding, but you want them to be exceptionally outstanding to have a better chance of getting into school. Just try to imagine that. You have a coach, let's say, or you have teachers, and you're at a swim meet or whatnot, and you're about to run the race, then all of a sudden this coach from nowhere that you don't know shows up in your face and tells you how to swim your freestyle or how to swim your race. Does that give you confidence? It certainly would not for me. I'd start double thinking, what did I do wrong? Like, why do I need this help? And that can be a source of frustration or resentment or depression even, which I've seen before, okay? So I worry about this because especially young people, when they're starting out, they're very formative. Their ideas are still developing. Okay? And their confidence is somewhat fragile. It may not seem so, but it is, because they haven't had the life experience to be able to get back up from failure a lot before, right? It's still new to them. So very important, in my opinion, is that you have to keep in mind when you're doing these sorts of things that if they're very high achieving, you might actually have them start to question themselves when this happens. A lot of consultant teams also have a very rigorous structure, which is great, but at the same time, they have a tendency to just go through their structure from what I've seen and not necessarily talk to the candidates as a peer, as a person to sort of have a discussion with us. No more, you have to execute A, B, C, D, E, check these boxes off, make sure you get them right. So it's almost sort of like a consultant knows best. I'm the senior, you're the junior, I've been through this before. For me, I find that somewhat reprehensible, okay? The reason why I say it is, I'll say it again, I'm a guy and I like sports, okay? Most of the consultant teams that I have seen in terms of their pedigree, in terms of their background, are usually people that have been on admissions committees in university. And that obviously gives them experience that I don't have, because I was never a career admissions consultant. But you know what I am? I'm the person that got into Wharton by myself without any admissions advice. I'm the person that had the drive to figure it out. Like you guys, many of you guys who either started careers in the United States or started businesses by yourselves. It's not that somebody held your hand to do it. You had to figure it out yourself. So, which is more effective in terms of, let's say, if you wanted to go and you want, as a child, the equivalent of Harvard, let's say, would be like getting into the NBA as a basketball player. Which one do you think is more effective? The person who has been to the NBA and played there. That would be the person that got in, like a student that got admitted. Or the person that knows all the rules about how to get into the NBA, knows how to get to the combine, knows how the rules work during the game, like a really good referee. Which one is better? So I leave that to you to decide. But I know myself, the competitive nature that's required necessarily to get in, that sort of passion that's required to get in, I think is one of those critical elements that can put you over the top when you go to apply. So that's really how I approach things when I'm talking to students. It's the same thing, I think, for if you were to take a class basketball player that's trying to go to the NBA, okay, and you were to give him an NBA referee to talk to versus LeBron James, not to say I'm LeBron, but somebody that's played in the NBA. Which one do you think he or she would listen to more? The NBA player or the referee? That's just the question I ask, okay? So that being said, this is probably me, okay? I'm old, probably uncool, right? But, you know, I have a little bit of style in me. I still remember, you know, most of my friends, I'm originally from Detroit, so I'm a Detroit kid. You know, most of my friends when I was growing up were actually African-American. So I have a little bit of uniqueness in me. So once in a while, I can surprise the young generation. They find it kind of amusing, I think. But otherwise, you know, we can be a generation apart, just like, you know, parents, for example, and it's nothing we can control. It's just our experience. So that's really what that is. All right. So the next question that we had here was part of the frequently asked questions was, you know, how can we foster hard work and study? And, you know, my question here really is this even the right question for us? I mean, do we even know what's going on? Should we just push? My parents just pushed arbitrarily, right? But do we even know what the child or what the young adult really wants? I would want to know. That's personally what it is for me. So to me, you got to find that. Got to give it time to mature and develop, and then try to nurture that, right? And set intermediate goals and try to hit them to build that confidence, right? That's what you should do. Don't try to necessarily criticize too much. You just provide constructive criticism, but we're in the West here, and if they're brought up here, they're going to compare between the way their friends are being treated behaviorally versus the way they're being treated. I know I felt that when I was growing up, okay? So let's kind of hold this bullet point for a second, and then let's talk about this, right? How can we foster creativity and independence? And I'll tell you this, like when you look at this, right? It says, don't be afraid of adversity, right? Welcome it. At first, right, everybody's afraid of failing, right? But when you're put under the screws and you're under pressure and you have to perform, right? sometimes you find out there's something that you didn't think you could do that you actually can do. And that happens a lot. And once you get that, that's breakthrough, right? It's a breakthrough for your confidence, breakthrough for your motivation. So I think, again, we talked about this before a little bit. I said, those of you who came to the United States, started a new career without anyone helping you, those of you who started business without anyone helping you, people didn't just give you a handout to try. You had to build it. They didn't give it to you. You have to take it. That's what it is. And so many times you will fail, but that one time you succeed, you realize it wasn't them that was was right. It was you that was able to do. So that's really what that is. And I think in this day, every generation also that we have, the good thing about it is our society gets better and better. Our technology gets better and better. So parents sometimes have more capability to be flexible and spend more time around their kids. But this does not mean, I think in American English, we call it helicoptering. It means that you're hovering over the kid all the time. Well, that doesn't allow them to develop, right? Because you don't allow them to fall. That's not a good thing. And this is not something that's just, within our community. It's something that exists all over, especially in the more affluent or rich communities culturally. A lot of the offspring don't have the motivation that the first generation had, right? The second generation already has too much. And that's one thing I actually also worry about for my own daughter. I try to make sure that she doesn't have too much, albeit, the school she goes to, everybody has so much in terms of resource. So really that's what this is all about, is that, pain is not a bad thing. It's a question of, as long as the pain does not do some sort of permanent damage or irreparable harm, you're okay. It's part of learning to fail so that you can figure out how to get better. And again, from the basketball game perspective, how much does a person learn from winning all the time? I don't think they learn nearly as much as when they lose. So that's really what that is. I have a clip here, and it was meant more for the students because I think they're more in the movie culture. But if you want to see it, I can show it to you. Basically, this is a clip from an old Star Trek movie, but it talks about the way a lot of folks think about how, they should view the world. And the person talking is the captain of the Star Trek Enterprise, which is what the Star Trek is all about. So let me see if I can play this.
Now learn something about yourself.
No, I refuse.
Jim, try to be open about this.
About what? I've made the wrong choices in my life? Did I turn left when I should have turned right? I know what my weaknesses are. I don't need Cyborg to take me on a tour of them.
If you just unbend and all...
And be brainwashed by this con man?
I was wrong. This con man took away my pain.
Damn it, Bones, you're a doctor. You know that pain and guilt can't be taken away with the wave of a magic wand. They're the things we carry with us, the things that make us who we are. If we lose them, we lose ourselves. I don't want my pain taken away. I need my pain.
Cyborg, this is...
So William Shatner has a unique way about him. That's the person that you see as an actor. Obviously, he's playing a role there, but I believe he's in his 90s now. And if you look at him, he doesn't look that much different than that picture today. So it just tells you, like, the person himself also is, the way they act also is a personification of them. So at the end of the day, I think the bottom bullet that I put down here is really important. It's the way I think of things when I'm talking to the next generation, which is that the child makes the calls, has the responsibility and ownership. Even if they're not necessarily ready, it's our duty to try to steward that and assume that that is the case at some point in time, especially when they become teenagers, is that you're going to become a young adult very soon. It's time, right? You have the reins, and our job is to help guide you. So that's my hope. My little one's only 9, so I can say this from afar without necessarily getting myself in trouble, right? But I'm sure that when I get to it and she becomes 13 or 14, she won't listen to me either. So maybe that's the time when I'll call you. All right, so here, I thought this was interesting because I wanted you guys to know that obviously I cannot be the first person to think of this, nor do I claim to be. I'm not that person. But Elon Musk, whom I think all of us know, obviously very wealthy, and I have the Tesla in the background here because my students in university, I teach investments, so they always talk about Tesla and other sort of growth stocks and high-flying ideas. So that being said, this is, I think, part of the Dojo supercomputer that's in the back here. So that being said, Elon put it in a very good way. Now, Elon's a UPenn grad, like myself, but I believe in physics, which means he's smarter than me. Okay. I was an engineer before. I was mechanical engineering, so I did physics too, but physics for the pure sciences is, I think, much more rigorous. So that being said, Elon said a couple of things in here. And he said, don't just follow the trend, right? And he said, also, think about constantly how you can continuously improve. Neither of these things is a follower mentality. Neither of these things is a refinement mentality. It is not that at all. It is a create and innovate and inspire mentality, right? Now, yes, there is only one Elon out there, but there are a lot of successful entrepreneurs and a lot of successful people here in the United States, more so probably on a percentage basis than just about anywhere else in the world, okay? And so I think this mentality is not necessarily uniquely American, but it's probably concentrated here in the United States more than anywhere else. It's more free. So this is something that we'll probably come back to at the end. Maybe we'll do a first principle sort of thought experiment and see what happens. So what does this mean for elite admissions and colleges in general, and how do you motivate, how do you inspire? Well, you just ask yourself this question, like for admissions for college, put yourself in the shoes of the person that's running it at Harvard. Ask yourself what you would want for a class. Do you want the whole class to behave the same way as in everybody's super smart, talented, technically, everybody has straight A's, everybody has 1590 SAT scores, all these things that we focus on to make sure that our son and daughter have the foundation, but nothing else. More just thinking about, I know how to go to class, hit the books, and get that A. Well, I don't think that's what they want. They want the next generation CEOs, the next generation leaders of the free world, right? That's the whole point. So what they do is they create this mosaic, this puzzle of all these different types of personalities from different areas. Okay? I guess I can take an aside quickly. I had there's a Wharton group that I'm a part of that's, it's hard to say it's right now, but it's getting older by a lot. Is that I keep thinking it's almost been 20 years since I've been to Wharton. Okay, but one of our alumni, a class of '99, son just got accepted to Harvard. And the interesting thing about it, though, is that he didn't want to go to Harvard. He wanted to go to USC. And the reason why was he had a huge interest in film, self-taught, self-derived, probably when he started 12 or 13. Now, not everybody can say that, right? But this particular person did. Guess what his parents, though, wanted him to do? Number one, they wanted him to apply at Harvard. Number two, they wanted him to go to STEM, to science and engineering. Very, very classical, right? In terms of Chinese parenting. And we're talking about a Wharton graduate, MBA, 99. Should have the perspective of a person that is worldly and allow for that freedom. But the first inclination was to go to STEM, right? Okay, so he applied to Harvard, gave a couple of his short movies that he created. Those movies, believe it or not, without him wanting to compete, he sent them in just to get sort of editorial feedback and comments to some of the film festivals. They won these short film categories. Harvard called, I think he applied a regular decision. Harvard, in terms of the admissions process, when you put your application in, usually takes what, a month and a half to get back to you, right? It took 2 days. They called him back in 2 days and said, who are you? You've got to come to our university. So after talking to his parents and doing a little compromise, he realized Harvard has a pretty good film school too. So to make his parents happy as well, he's going to go to Harvard. what it is it's that creation. It's that next generation thinking. It's that out of the box. You want to do something, you have to do it. It has to be your own, right? So here, that's what I said here, is that, look, he had everything going against him in terms of opinion. He might have had resources. That's no problem, right? Because he's well-to-do. But everyone and his mother was telling him to go to STEM. But he had a really strong personality. So he just kept doing his own thing. And who was right at the end? Of course he's right. Because he knows what he wants. Now, not everybody is that strong-willed, right? Which is the reason why the discussions have to be made, that we have to talk to our young people and find out what it is that they're really looking for. That's really the most important thing. And then sort of reason it out, like what are the possible vectors out of what you're going to do, right? So that's really what I preach when I talk to people at that age, is that, look, it has to be yours. You have to believe in it, okay? You have to do it for yourself. It's not for anyone else. I know, because I did it for my parents initially. I went into electrical engineering for my parents initially, and I realized that wasn't for me. I had to convert to mechanical engineering because it was hard for me to visualize the charge and all the physics around the electrical engineering, because it's all circuits and electricity, right? So that being all said, regardless of what you do, it's a lottery when you get up to that level, because there's too few spots for too much demand, right? So all you can do is maximize your candidacy for it if you want to play fair, which I always do. I don't care if other people cheat. What I care about is if I don't cheat, because if I get in there and we, let's say your son or daughter gets in it, it's because of their merit and it's because of their own achievement. And nothing is more important, in my opinion, for confidence, right? So that's really what this is. So just keep in mind, this is the first step where you realize that things start to become unfair in the world, right? It's sort of an eye-opening experience, but it's part of the adversity that you have to deal with, okay? There'll probably be another story I'm thinking of right now. There's another candidate that it was pretty unfair. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later, right? So when we talk about applications and we're thinking about this, why do you need to really think about this in soul search? Is because you can try to fabricate something, you can try to create something that's sort of an after image of yourself. But what the college really wants to know is who you really are. If you put out who you really are in the application and you've done a good job of representing yourself, that's the maximum candidacy you can get. And it's not going to be perfect, because none of us are. None of us are perfect, right? But what is important is that you don't let that imperfection dominate you. Instead, you're always trying to work on it to become perfect. It is the goal, the future goal, to become perfect, to try to approach perfection always, right? But know that you're always going to be imperfect. When that happens, people around you want to follow you. That is basic leadership 101. By example, you will teach them how to do. And that is what universities at the top level look for, because they're looking for that next generation, okay? That being said, if that's the case, then if we're talking about test scores and grades and what this, GPA, this grade point stuff, and all the barriers and the hoops we have to jump through for academics, we should just do a one size fit all? Of course not, right? It has to be directed towards each particular person. And that's really what this is all about. Think about if you had a bunch of robots that came in, right? Even if they all went to the same camps, or they did all the same debates, and they all won the same stuff, there's zero separation there. If they all apply to Harvard, Harvard's probably only going to take one. So there's not separation there. And it's not a unique story. So that's something you just, in terms of what we do, that we have to think about. Okay. All right, so what do I do when I talk about this stuff? Well, as you can see with me, I have a very sort of flexible, open system, because I expect different responses from my potential candidates. And so I require a very in-depth interview process, where it could be with a parent and the children. It could be with the child alone. It could be with a parent alone. It could be all three. It depends on how the initial Q&A works. but generally that's how I work, is I want to make sure that there is no stone left unturned when we look at this stuff. I want to make sure that I have truly a good fit and that we get along well, okay? And that doesn't mean that, we're both not going to do anything. It means that we both understand what the goal sets are and why, and where I'm going to help and where I'm necessarily going to let them take lead, okay? So that's what it is. It's a give and take, it's a balance. Now, that being said, right, when we talk about the process, we'll talk about really what their true passions are. And that just takes a while sometimes for things to come out. These whiteboarding and soul searching sessions, in terms of the classic app process, on average, when we're done with these things, it could be as long as a small book, because we basically dig into the real fundamental reason why they're successful and what really makes them tick, what gets them up in the morning, okay? So this is really what it is. I do a lot of digging and listening, but in a very sort of hands-off way, if you will. It doesn't seem confrontational. And maybe that's just akin to my personality. Maybe that's just akin to the way I've led groups in the past before, like when I was in corporate. People always wondered how I could do with 5 people what it took other people 25 to do. And the reason why is I gave ownership and I have faith in people. And you could see it, and it's authentic. I was willing to put my neck on the line to prove it. And that's the way I always was as a manager. So that's just me in a nutshell, okay? So, so again, when they do this, a lot of it is the fact that everything comes reasonably easy to them. So it's very difficult to figure out why this is needed. But over time, they recognize this is part of the maturation process, because not everybody around them is as bright as them, and they need to motivate them too. So that's really what this is, okay? We build by example. So we don't, oh, I believe there's a hand raised. Did somebody want to ask a question?
I think you can just directly, finish the whole presentation, and we will have the QA session. So basically, we will allow the parents to unmute and directly communicate with you.
Sure, sure, okay. Well, guys, like I said, I'm okay either way, because I do this in lecture all the time. It's very free form when I'm talking to students. So I appreciate it. So if you could hold on for a second, and we'll be done very soon, but you'll see. Hopefully, some of those questions will be answered. But when we talk about what we do, I always do things in an applied sense, just like I do in class. I teach investments in class. I don't give you theory. We do it real time. So in my class in college, they'll sit there and I'll ask them what's good, what's good to buy, what's good to sell, and very innocuously. And then the next lecture, you'll see their investments in my portfolio, as if daring them to prove me right. Why? Because nothing is like anything until you actually do it. You may say so, the theory may say it's good, but guess what? It means nothing until you try it, right? You can say you can be a great golfer until you actually pick up a club and try to hit it down the middle, right? So this is what this is, okay? I look at things always from that lens, and so be it, right? When I was doing things informally, I picked the folks that were a good fit for me, and therefore things went well. That was part of my good fortune, as well as, in terms of the back and forth, the relationship was also quite good. But, when I talked to Angie, she wanted to sort of systematize it. And what she said made sense. And so these days, when I work with IvyCompass, we have a great team with us. So this advisory team structure is talking about IvyCompass, is that, we realize that we need to have an official foundation behind it as well, in terms of the foundational structure. This isn't to say that I couldn't do it. It's just that my forte really is in finding that exceptional layer that puts you over the top, right? And bringing all those things together such that it would work in a way where the additional layer doesn't feel like work. So my partner in this is Tao. She is part of IvyCompass's team. Her children are also Ivy admits, Harvard and Yale, proof positive that from a rigorous sort of structured perspective, it can also be done. It's just that most of the time, most folks that are doing this, right, as consultant teams are doing it in structured ways, have never had that firsthand experience of having people get in that were very close to them. Whereas Tao's, like her, I believe her 2 daughters went to Harvard and Yale. And for me, it's just been all the people that I've worked with directly have done very, very well, which we'll see in a second, okay? So that's really what this is. So we can do both the academic rigor and the gates to pass academically, as well as the camps and activities that people may desire, because we have the network and we have the framework both with VisWise and AFI-Compass, but we also have what I have, which is that outsized X factor. So a good example would be like this. You want your son or daughter to attend some sort of artificial intelligence or machine learning camp or crypto camp, okay? And there are some known camps out there that are quite good, probably affiliated with Ivy. Well, if you want to apply for that, yes, that's no problem. We can accommodate that. Meanwhile, I'm teaching them how to do what I had a 15-year-old candidate who was a coder, what we call a crypto degenerate. It's said in a good way. Degenerate generally means a bad thing, but in this case, the crypto degenerate means a good thing, is that you're part of the original people that coded crypto. So he knew those people. And within 2 years, he was at the crypto conference in Florida, and he brought CFOs and CEOs from the crypto companies to his Airbnb. That was the real conference, not the Bitcoin conference that was sitting in Miami with $5,000 a seat. And he actually asked me, he called me up, he said, Frank, I can't house all these people at my Airbnb. I have to have them coming in every other day because I don't have room. I was wondering if you can find me a mansion to rent. So it gives you an idea of the level of progression. This person, by the time he was 17, had a blog site that was read by 50 venture capital partners, was already published on Twitter by the venture capital partners, was, again, had the crypto progenitors, the people that actually created the coins, at his Airbnb. And all that stemmed from his skill and his interest. But it also stemmed from one conversation that was a 3-hour conversation I had with him initially that told him, stop hanging around Rhode Island. Make sure you go out and go to the places where these people are, because you have the wherewithal and the ability to talk to them. You may not think so, but you do. And in his own way and through our discussions, that's how it materialized. And to this day, he's a very good friend of mine. I don't know why, because he doesn't necessarily need my help anymore. But I think it's the respect that we developed from the get-go. That is the reason why I do what I do, because I love seeing where these people are going to go. It's like you have no idea where the rocket ship will go. It may go to Mars, it may go to Saturn, it may go outside the solar system. But the possibility is endless once they figure out what their true passion is. Okay? So that's really what that is. And so that's the hope, is that if you start with a camp, fine. You want to do that? Great. I'm not against it. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at the interests of the person and trying to optimize them. Then finally, when you get to application time, right, we do take a look at your essays, of course, recommendations. By that point in time, hopefully you've already developed your own style. But we'll try to teach you to unlearn what you've learned in high school. Because in high school, I hate to tell you this, they teach you to write like crap. Nobody wants to read a high school essay, ever. The reason why is it's too third person. It's too passive. We want to teach you how to write like a person that you want to follow. That's what that is. Okay. And again, this is all part of the sort of experience that I've had. But one thing I do not do is I will not fabricate anything. Everything that we do is legitimate and genuine, because I've seen enough of those Shanghai consultants that sit around and create some crazy stuff. Okay. And I don't care whether you get in or not. That's not me. That's not my principle. My principle is to make sure that we develop strong young men and young women that are confident in themselves, that know themselves, that know they did it. No one else did it except them. That is what is important, because if they can do that, they can do anything. So that's the way I look at these things. Okay. So let's talk results, right? This is just for me. And again, like I said, I've been very fortunate. I only look at, folks with top 10. Why? Not because I'm elitist. I just look at it as like, I like a challenge. Sometimes the people that come to me are sort of just self-selected that way. Okay. And we've been very fortunate. As you can see, statistics don't lie. What's even crazier is on top of that, like I told you, like the person who submitted his short form films and in 2 days got a begging request from Harvard to go to the school. Okay. This particular candidate was from us. And you can see that's that school that they asked me to go teach, which I turned down. Okay. But they sent, beside the big application admissions packet that said, welcome to Brown, they sent this, which was a handwritten note. You can ask how many people get a handwritten note for your admissions. I can tell you it's very, very few. And the reason why is they knew this person was good enough to go to any school in the nation, most likely the one that was a few miles north of here with a big H. And so they begged her to go. And you can see what got her into that school. It was the visceral nature of that essay that she wrote that was completely hers by that point in time. Okay. It was so visceral and it was so real that I got a call from her father and I thought something had gone wrong. And he said to me, Frank, is this real? Is this true? And I told him, I said, it is exactly what your daughter wrote. We did not fabricate anything. Maybe you should ask her why. And he said, I never knew these events actually happened. I never knew that her grandmother would do such things. I almost want to go down to the Caribbean and go find her and hurt her because of what she did. I said, well, look, I can tell you this, it seemed real enough to me. I think you should talk to your daughter about it. It turns out it did happen. But it goes to show you how deep we go if that's the truth. That's how this works. And again, this is not something where it's forced. It's something where the relationship between myself as, let's say, a mentor advisor and the particular candidate, how that sort of rationalizes itself out. Okay. So that's really what this is. I'm not looking to fabricate greatness. The greatness is there in the person. It's a question of whether we can find sort of the humility and the patience to be able to bring it out. So that's really what this is, just to show you. Okay. All right. Now, all this stuff is said, right? We talk about college admissions, all this kind of stuff. I felt like there's more to it, right, than just college. College is a huge step, right? You go from basically from a person, young person, child in the family with a roof on your head to go to college, to have your own place, hopefully at some point in time, your own friends, you start doing your own things, you're of adult age, you start being able to, I don't know, sort of dabble in things like drinking, which may not be so great at first, right? But you just, as parents, we all cross our fingers, hope that, they will be responsible enough and safeguard themselves, right? But what I, believe it or not, for me, the admissions isn't the final goal for me. It never is, okay? So forgive me, I'll take a slight aside and you'll see what I do in my teaching. So where do I teach? I teach at this small college called Providence College. You might know them because they're in the March Madness basketball. It's been a long time since they've actually been there. I have nothing to do with that. I wish I could say that, but I've had a tendency to be lucky in my past and always be part of universities where they were on some sort of run to some sort of championship. So that was always a lot of fun. So I've been there about 2 years, okay? I teach investments, and again, I teach it in a very applied way. I don't teach it in terms of academics hardly at all. We talk about markets all the time. Right now, Russia, Ukraine, We talk about how to run trades back and forth. So I basically use all the hedge fund techniques that we use in actual institutional trading to work with them. And I don't let off the pedal. I will push at the speed of what Wall Street is expecting them to do. That way, when they're ready, when they decide to interview with somebody, they are ready. So that being said, right, this is what happened. When I joined, they were pretty much putting people in Wall Street, but in operations positions, in middle office positions. I know many of us, we started in those positions, technical positions. It's not bad, but it's not good, right? I mean, it's more stable than a front office position, but obviously you don't get the upside and you don't get to show your true colors, which I think any of us really, if you put us in a situation front office, especially dealing with, our own culture back in China or whatnot, we would do fantastically well. But sometimes we don't get the opportunity, which is why we want our children to do that. So that being said, right, they went from that to during COVID, almost everybody got a job in the network that I have. I mean, on my phone, I probably have 50 people now that are part of this group, and they all help each other, which is kind of scary. So this is a Catholic university, and I am not Catholic. My biggest claim to fame is I went to a Catholic school church when I was in Detroit for schooling because the Detroit public schools were so violent at some point in time. I spent a year in Detroit public schools, and it was, how shall I say, it's stories for another time. But let's just say 2 of my friends in kindergarten did not make it out of class, as in they were killed. So that gives you an idea of just how violent that was. And being the only Asian kid in the school, you can imagine the sort of vitriol that occurs. That sort of, if you think the Asian discrimination and stuff like that in New York City is bad right now, think again. You haven't seen Detroit. So that being said, most of these people, students, are not Asian, being Catholic. They're Irish Catholic, Italian Catholic, so mostly Caucasian. Okay, some underrepresented, but very few. Okay, yet this is the response, right? You have an Asian professor and American-born, Chinese, but still Asian, right? Not Catholic, and this is the response. So if it's not getting into college, what is it? As I said before, I enjoy talking to the next generation. I love to hear their ideas. And if I can help you, it's a good thing. I think it's a good karmic thing to do on top of that. So what is this? This is from my phone. It's not scouring the last 2 years for a couple of quotes. This is what happens in about 1 to 2 months or so. So you can get an idea of sort of the response that I get in school. And this is real, right? So again, there's so many things here. I'll give you a second to read some of these things if you want, okay? But the reality is that, like I said, messages don't lie. When it's good, it doesn't matter who you are. They look at it and they say, this is the person that is changing the curve at the university. Now, did I strike out to do that? No. All I did was just, I went there basically because, well, a friend of mine who used to run the state pension at Rhode Island, he's a good friend of mine. He's a Goldman Sachs person, 20 years at Goldman Sachs, then came over to do pension work at the state of Rhode Island. Him and I made a gentleman's bet, which I lost probably deliberately, right? And I ended up going to Providence College to do an interview with the dean, whom he knew very well. And this is sort of the result. They asked me to teach one class turned into 3. And so that's, become a bigger and bigger fixture at their place. But I'm notoriously publicity shy. I don't like to tell anybody what I'm doing because I feel that it's better that way. It's better for the students to sort of announce their own achievement rather than me saying anything. So that's pretty much what this is, okay? And then if you want to find one final text message, I think this student pretty much said it all, right? I think you look at this and this is what I try to achieve with every person that I work with. And he just says here, it's like said the impact was that I made a call to check in on him on the summer, and don't mind the profanity, but it is true. It completely changed his mindset in terms of what to do. And since then, I've not had to worry about what he's going to do. I know what he's going to do, and it's going to be better than what I would have expected he was going to do. That is simply the way these things work. Okay? So it says here that the mindset changed, and it's crazy that the jobs people are getting speak to that. And he said, I just wish. So I cut that off deliberately at that point. What he said was, I just wish there were more of us out there. And I told him, don't worry, I'm working on that. Okay? So every year I do it, another, 30 people show up when I do it. We try to keep the quality high, but that's what it is. So why am I doing this for Little Providence College? Because University of Pennsylvania didn't ask me. That's why. I'm not against my alma mater. I love my alma mater. But guess what? You don't want to play with the students that I have, because this is what happens here. Don't have to read this particular text, but if you ever do get a transcript of the slides, what this is actual iPhone snapshots, okay, of them networking with each other, which I tell them to do, okay? What is important with me is that if you sit there and you don't help each other after you have worked with me, that is to me a failure. You are part of the same brotherhood and sisterhood of what we do. That should be the first lesson you learn. If you do that, then you create something greater than yourself. Because at some point in time, everybody falls, and you're going to need help to get your momentum back. What I teach them is I teach them stuff that they would only generally know 10 or 15 years ahead. But I do it now. Why? Because it's important. Because they're good people. They're people of good character, and they deserve that. So that's what I'm after here. Okay? So anecdotally, my friend that ran the state pension, where I lost the bet and I ended up going to school, I told him, if you're going to make me go to Providence College to teach, you're going to have to interview some of my candidates. You're going to have to interview some of my students. He goes, no. He's an Ivy guy. Okay? Because look, I'll get the Northwestern guys, the Brown guys, the Wharton guys. I don't want you guys to feel bad. I was like, don't worry. They won't. The people I send you will be qualified. I'm not saying you have to accept them either, of course. You pick the people that you want. And again, he's partial to the Ivies. Guess who he hired? No Wharton, although there was one. No Brown, although there was two candidates. No Northwestern, there were two. No Harvard, there was one. It was the Providence College kid. Why? Because he simply knew the stuff better. So again, doesn't necessarily mean too much, the brand, albeit though, if you do get into elite, right, you do have the opportunity to network at a very high level. It just jumps you up. So I'm not saying elite schools are not good. They're great, but you have to know why you're going there, and you have to know how to use it. And that's part of the learning process that we also promote as well. Okay. All right, so the press. So I'm not a particular on this particular slide, but I just want to show you what happened, okay? So it says press here. I hate press, and this is very true. I don't like to be known. Angie's a good friend of mine. That's the reason why she dragged me out into the light, okay? It's not really my forte. When I saw the thing was being live streamed on YouTube, that took me for a loop. I didn't want to really do that. I like to make sure that I'm kind of low key, but I guess I'm out there now, so there's not much I can do about it. All right, so what is this? Well, for those of you on the left side, for those of you who like to look at competitions, I know a lot of us like to look at these things. Got to go compete, right? This is the university winning the CFA Research Challenge. For those of you who don't know, that's the Chartered Financial Analyst Challenge. It's a lot like, let's say a Wharton level boot camp awards type thing, okay? They won it 2 years in a row. Who did they beat? I hate to tell this to Angie, but they beat Yale's MBA team twice. Just thrashed them, okay? Does it mean Yale MBA is bad? No, doesn't mean they're bad at all. It just means my kids are better. Here's the best part. I'm not even on the advisor team. I'm not officially there. It's just that when these kids talk to me, these two kids right here are specifically my group kids, and they led that team, right? Guess what happened this year? Hasn't been printed yet. They won it again. And guess who led it? One of mine, right? So what happened? So we have a student here, right here in the middle, top middle, okay? And I have obviously a picture of our friend Jay Powell, who has got a big job to do. You can see with Jay here. He has a picture with him. How did that happen? I'll leave that to you to figure out. Let's just say that he's not Jay's friend, nor am I. But somehow he was able to get that picture, okay? So that's a story in and of itself, right? This is what we push people to do. The other side is, this is more along Angie's line. She raised a lot more money for mass, but what did I do? If you're more into the social benefit structure or trying to do what for COVID, what did we do? Well, we raised money for mass. We built a supply chain to China. On the day that they shut down the 3M production to the United States because the two sides were warring with each other, the same 3M factory looked the other way and shipped our mass because we need the number 2 guy there. Thanks to my friends network. It wasn't thanks to me, but thanks to, and the students were up with me till 3 o'clock in the morning every day working this thing because they knew it had to be done. So they dragged me out for that interview too. I really didn't want to be known. I said it's for the students' benefit. But that's the kind of stuff that is dramatic and it is real and it is genuine, and they know they did it because just like Elon said, he can tell when somebody actually did something versus somebody that actually managed it. Okay. Final thing here is the sort of like the end stage. So after you get out of school, what do you want? Right. So I'm in business. So obviously, what do? We do the Wall Street thing. We do private equity, we do hedge funds. These are all the letters, a few of them that from my group. So if you let me know if you don't see something there from top bulge bracket or top private equity. But again, just a normal school with normal people, but with uncommon dedication and passion, right? All right. So let's close this with one final thing, which is first principles, right? So let's think about Elon's thing. It starts from the beginning. He said, what is most important to all of us, in my opinion? I think the most important thing to all of us is not us, it's our kids, right? If it's our kids, what do we want from them? My opinion is that we want them to grow up to be happy, young, confident men and women that know what they want, successful in what they do, generous, fearless, right? If that's the case, then you don't want somebody to follow. You want them to lead, right? If that's the case, you want them to create and you want them not to refine. Okay, so what does it take to crack the top? That's what it takes, is to be the leader, right? Not the follower. To get in, you need that to get the job. And guess what? That's what I aim for. That's what we do. So I hope this has been a interesting discussion for you, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Franklin, for such a fantastic webinar. So actually, we see Angeline just popping up. So do you want to say something before we start the QA?
Yeah, okay. So should I do it? Okay. I hear you talk about my name a couple of times, Frank. I know we are dear friends, and I'm friends with your wife first, right? You both are extraordinary person and very, very nice heart. So I really appreciate that when these guys need help, even Frank is a person that really take care of his parents, take care of his daughter, and that touched my heart. He even gave up some of his own career to take care of his parents. So, I really appreciate that. He always take time to help my friends every single year, I always have something ask him to emergency help. Even last year, and he always jump in. So when VisVites need help, I say, hey, Frank, I need some help. I can't afford to hire a very expensive teacher, but I know you can, help me. So he did step in. During this winter, he was in Taiwan, take care of his sick mom, and he even died from 4 a.m. to teach all about kids use personal finance, and nobody even noticed he was in Taiwan. He wake up 4 a.m. for us. So thank you, Frank. And I do during the Thursday night, my sharing about 400 people, parents there, and I told them about touching story about how, you, of course, the other counselor too, but most important, and you helped me and Alex, my son, to find that point that you just trigger my brain, I really, we all stuck there. My son's counselor, have a couple of them advice, but we just watch his essay. We don't know where to go. We don't know how to help him if he had ADHD. But when he talked to Alex midnight, remember you talked to until 2 a.m. I have to stop you, but that night you really wake me up. You inspire Alex, inspire me, so I know how to actually break that point, how to continue his essay, write about his story. So from I know guy parents, Frank, it's special. Don't treat him, use a standard that you probably already talked to 5 or 10 counselors, and you use the same standard to measure him. He won't be in your metrics. He won't be in your metrics, but he's truly there and help your kids, inspire them, talk to them. The one thing is what we're missing is we as a first generation, we didn't grow up here. We know the difference, but we don't know how to talking to our, at least I don't know. I said, some parents know, good for you, but I don't know. So I think I learned from Frank how to, from different angle, to try to have a conversation with kids. Very challenging situation. And also, after that, every time, and Alex take your winter class, when you have a class, he opened my door and Mom, come to listen to Frank talk. You should learn how to talk to kids. Frank is very good. I trust me, Alexander never really praised other people. He never praised his brother, sister, and not praise me, but he does highly respect you. And of course, one of the counselor really treat him like sister too. So here, if any parents, if you just want a few hours to counsel your kids with Frank, feel free to do so. He is very, very expensive, I'm telling you. He is very expensive, but for the reason that he helped us, he cut his price in half for VisVites. So lucky all of you, because before I met him, trust me, he's Andrew. That's a couple years before. He always charged $1,000 per hour because his time is very precious. And I said, Frank, our platform, we can't afford that, please. So he said, okay. So he did lower his price, and he's there. He's not really a person calculating money, but he wanted people value his time. Because he doesn't want people just feel like, oh, I pay this money and you ought to do this for me. So I want every parent to know that those people are extraordinary, and their advice sometimes worse. If they can change your life, your kid's life, that's worst. That's priceless. From my heart, I really want to thank you, Frank, because you changed my life too. Because my husband always say I'm a failure because I can't help my kids. But now I said, hey, see, because you always say you spend so much time to volunteer. You don't even have time for your kids. But now I always proud to tell him, hey, look, Alex getting to NYU with Frank's help. He said, okay. So now I got support from my husband to do the volunteer. So I really appreciate. So that trigger point, that inspiration, you not just inspire my kids, you inspire me, inspire many of other people too. And thank you. You also help a lot of my friends. Like last year during Christmas, 2 days before you are in Taiwan, you pick up my friends, best friends. They are very in need to before the deadline. You just jump in, and I really appreciate it. I just want to say that. But please, all the parents, please don't use all the time of the Frank. I just want to say that some, I think respect. Okay.
Oh, okay. So it looks like the Angeline give the stage back to me and Frank. Okay, so I switch to Chinese a little bit. Yeah, so一些家长在问哈怎么和那个 Frank 联系，我把我的这一个微信号码呢是已经在 chat 里面发了很多次了。Frank 林的话呢，他现在也是我们 IvyCompass 平台上的 exclusive 的 consultant。所以的话呢，你要联系我之后的话呢，我会帮你们安排和 Frank 以及我们罗涛老师的这个 inquiry meeting 哈。Frank 和罗涛老师的话呢，他们是一个组合。我相信刚刚在 Frank 也在这一个 presentation 里面提到了。Frank 的话呢，他的特色是know how to inspire kids and help them to really find their passion。所以的话呢，他会帮助孩子来找到自己的一个内驱力吧，然后让孩子呢来自推。罗涛老师的话呢，他在这一个选课以及竞赛以及我们说的一些比较这个正规的传统的这样的一个升学辅导上面呢，也是非常有经验。所以他们两个的这一个组合呢，是一个非常基本上是就是说解决了短板的这样的一个组合，非常的适合一些孩子可能在家里面不太听父母的话哈，然后可能也是找不到自己的一个 passion 和 inspiration 的孩子。同时的话呢，当然这些孩子每个人都是有这个升学的需求的，所以最终的结果还是要把孩子送到他们想要去的这个学校里面。所以我们也是就是form such a combination between Frank and Tao。好的，那 OK。So before we delve into the QA, I want to do a little bit advertising for Wizwise Summer Camp。好的，让我来 share 一下 screen。好的，大家现在可以看到我的屏幕哈。这一个思汇学院的首期的线下的夏令营呢，是会在7月24号和8月6号之间来举行。我们呢是会和纽约上周的一个非常著名的一个军校来联合来举办这一次的思汇学院的线下夏令营。孩子们呢会在纽约上周的军校呢封闭式的住2个星期，然后的话呢，我们会有财商、创新、创业。等不同的一个适合不同年龄段的孩子的课程，同时的话呢，我们还会帮他们安排，比方说游泳啊或者篮球这样的一个运动，让他们不只是学习，也是锻炼到了身体，结交了朋友。此外的话呢，我们思汇也会派出我们的这个最好的老师哈，以及我们的这个志愿者来全程的陪伴。之前的话呢，在这个讲座开始之前的家长还给我们提议说，一定要管理这个手机哈，一定要把手机给收走。所以我们也会对这个手机呢来进行一些严格的管理。此外的话呢，所有参加我们这个 Summer Camp 的学生的话呢，还将免费的参加一次我们的这个全国商赛的辅导。刚刚我在这个讲座的开始的时候呢，也提到了我们今年这个商赛的这个成绩是非常的好的，包括沃顿，我们是有2个队打进了全球的前50强。如果大家父母知道这个沃顿商赛的话，应该是知道这是个非常难的一个比赛。此外的话呢，我们的这个 Diamond Challenge 目前的话呢，也是10个队有8个队进到 next round，8个队里面呢，目前我们是得知有2个队也是再次的进入到了半决赛的这个 next round。好的，大家如果想要了解更多的详情的话呢，这里有一个小助手的2维码。一会儿的话呢，我又会把这个小助手的这个微信 ID 发到这个 chat box 里面，大家您可以加这个我们思汇的小助手，了解这一个课程的详情。好的，我
加一点吧，我加一点哈。那个这个 Frank 会，因为我们中间高中生就是我们有我们会加那个2门课在这个 Summer Camp 啊。除了这些运动的 schedule， 可以在网上都可以看到。如果你进群里面看到每一天每个星期的 schedule 都有，每一天都有。然后呢，这个我这个use personal finance， 我们会加use personal finance， 就是小孩怎么理财怎么 budget 的这门课。这门课应该是我跟 Frank 一起教，我肯定是在现场哈。然后 Frank能不能从 Rhode Island 开车过来，我到时候跟他商量一下。然后我们这个use 这个 YEB 就是创新创业的课程，我们也是我们这次夏令营的一个重点，就是大家可能今天才知道的好消息啊，我们是已经有2个队已经进入了半决赛，也是 Top 1% Diamond Challenge。今天刚刚收到消息，可能还有更多的队哈，我们也是总共全球有670个队。这个最后的半决赛只选出10个队啊，那我们有2个队已经进了也是好消息。那么凡是参加我们 Diamond Challenge 的这些所有的学生这个在 参加夏令营在最后的一天，所有的这个都会分组，也会有跟 Diamond Challenge， 我们用 Diamond Challenge 的这个标准来要求我们夏令营每一个小组每一个小朋友都能有这样一个学习和这个最后商业计划，然后这些计划呢也可以去投放到各种比赛里面去参赛，而且这个线下的结束以后，我们还会在秋天还会有这样课，还会重新组队啊。凡是参加夏令营都不用再收任何费用，就是一直可以参加就是下一年的 Diamond Challenge， 真正的 Diamond Challenge， 甚至其他商赛哈。所以这也是我们主要的。那我们这个暑假没有投资课，我们就是财商课。好，我就补充这一点。
好的，现在可以看到这是我们的一个春假的 mini camp 哈，大家可以看这个时间，还有以及我们这个课程。其实的话呢，大家知道这个私会的话呢，我们最主要的呢还是在做这个青少年的财商以及这个投资的一些启蒙，所以您可以看到哈，像这个我们的春假的话呢，有 financial intelligence 的系列下面的这个 Kid CEO 以及 Kid Banker 的这样的不同的适合我们孩子的这样的一个课程，以及我们的这个非常受欢迎的 Kid Start Game， 这个的话呢也会让我们3到6年级的孩子哈，就是 have a taste of 这一个投资市场，他们会每天的话呢会自己买卖股票，然后尝试一下这个买卖股票的乐趣。对于较高年级的学生来说的话呢，像Grade 7 以上的话呢，他们的话呢会继续在这个 mini camp 里面呢参加我们的这个 Level 2和 Level 3的这个投资课程的课程。投资课程的话呢，大家知道哈，就从 Level 1一直上到 Level 5之后的话呢，可以参与我们在每一年秋天的免费的这一个沃顿的商赛的带队。所以如果孩子还没有安排这个春假的话呢，也欢迎您联系我们的私会小助手来了解这个不同的课程以及他们的详情。好的，我现在这个广告时间结束哈，我现在走到下一页，说一下，下一页呢，这上面呢有2个不同的2维码哈，有个2维码呢，您扫小助手 AKA 就是我哈，那个我会把家长们加入到我们的这个 AFI 的升学社群里面。如果您已经在我们的群里面的话呢，我可能就不会在家里进去了。然后呢，大家看到屏幕上的另外一个2维码的话呢，这个是 Frank 林的升学咨询服务的2维码。如果您现在听完这个 Frank 林的讲座，已经觉得它是非常合适您的家庭和您的孩子的话呢，您可以直接扫这个升学咨询服务的2维码。进去之后呢，是一个 form， 您需要填一些基本的信息。之后的话呢，我们 IvyCompass 的这一个小助手和服务的这个人员哈，会帮您对接给 Frank， 然后来安排一个 inquiry meeting。所以这2个码呢，大家请根据您的需求来进行扫码。好的，现在我们进入到我们的这一个 Q&A 的环节。OK， Frank， are you ready for the Q&A？